All right, so I'm pretty excited today because we're doing another CNC video specifically on this machine right here, which is the Makera Z1. This is kind of their entry-level machine into their lineup. I did a video probably about 8 months ago on the Carvera Air, which we will probably talk about a little bit today, but I'm not gonna really be doing a full in-depth technical review of this device because there's much more people out there that are able to do a much better job than me of that. What I'm gonna be doing today instead is actually using it to make a little macropad project. And the reason I'm doing a macropad is we will kind of talk about that as we talk about the machine. But the short, real quick kind of review of this is that it's basically a very good CNC for around $1,200 MSRP. Right now it's on Kickstarter for, I believe, $900. And also this video is going to be a little bit rushed because they want me to get it out before their Kickstarter ends on December 12th. So I'm kind of on a time crunch here. But yeah, we're going to jump over to the machine now. And we're just going to jump into building a little macropad project on this. So let's get started. So here is the bed of the machine. And my first and only real complaint on this is that this machine doesn't ship with like waste boards. So what I have to do actually is kind of use this. They're designed it so that you kind of cut into the actual bed MDF here, which I don't like. So I'm going to actually just take a piece of waste board here. This is just some MDF that I had for other projects. I'm going to put this on the bed, and that's where we're going to actually put our stock on, which is going to be some 6061 aluminum plate in 1.5 millimeter thickness for the plate of our keyboard build here. And what I'm going to do is just kind of go through and get this all fixed. I'm going to be using the method with some masking tape and then, of course, some super glue here to kind of hold that down. My last video went over this a little bit more in depth, but I'm just going to go through and get this all fixed here, and then I can kind of show you the setup that we're going to do. So that is now all fixtured nice and neatly on there. I'm gonna jump over to the computer now and kind of show you what we're gonna do because this is gonna actually end up being the plate. I just wanted to quickly give a brief rundown of what we're gonna be doing here because I think it's very important to mention before we do anything is that CNC isn't 3D printing. Now, I think Makera did a very good job kind of making it as easy as possible, and we'll talk about that more when we actually start looking at the machine doing things. But I mentioned this a lot in my last video on the Carvera Air, which you can actually see right there, is that CNC is very manual. You have to kind of tell the machine what to do. They do have programs that are a little bit helpful with Makera stuff, like they have Makera Cam. We're not going to really talk about that program here. It's a very basic program for like simple 2D operations. But what I like to live in is this right here, which is Fusion 360, because what we can actually do is we can right click this operation here and we can go to simulate, and you'll see that we can actually get a simulation of everything running here. So we can kind of get an idea of what the tools are going to do, where the tool is, and kind of make sure we're not going to have the machine explode, because it is possible on CNC to collide with the clamps, collide with wrong places of the machine and kind of break tools, break your material. This is kind of just running through the entire tool path, and it will give you an idea of what we're going to be doing here. We have, I believe, 3 different tools. So we have T9 times 2, we have T2, and then T9. So we only have 2 different tools here. I think the best way to do this is just start throwing some chips, and we'll get started with this plate here. So what I'm actually going to do with this before I start milling it is I'm going to actually reseat it by cutting this because the clamps don't reach far enough here. So this is kind of a little bit bubbling up. Just the way I'm fixturing this, I'm using like multiple layers. I just kind of have to do this. So I'm going to do that real quick. So now that's no longer bubbling there, we can actually start the job. So we're actually switched over really quick to my MacBook because this is a pre-production unit. I'm on beta software, so I can't get it installed on my Windows computer, but this is the actual program to kind of look at the machine and what it's gonna run. We're wirelessly connected to it. This is gonna show you all the pathing that we're gonna actually run on it. It'll tell you all your tool changes and stuff. But the really cool thing with these Makera devices that I like the most, especially from like a lot of the lower end CNCs, if we actually go in here and go to start our machine here, we have our auto Z probe and our scan margin. Now the scan margin, I'll show you in a second over on the machine, but it's really nice because it will actually tell you where it's going to cut. So it's another layer on top of everything that kind of saves you from destroying stuff, right? It saves you from colliding bits randomly, cutting in the wrong areas, making sure it will actually fit on your material so you don't start cutting and the next thing you know it's going off of it. But that's pretty nice here. I just kind of got it set in the middle of our material, so we just have that half and half of the 4x6 here. So we'll probe it in the middle, and then it's going to actually outline the material there. And really all we do on here is just press run, and then you will probably hear them in the background, and you can see it's now waiting for the tool. So I'm going to jump over to the machine now and kind of show you how this actually starts. So as you can see, this is flashing now, indicating it wants us to do something. These Makera devices actually have this really nice button on the front here that you can press to do things. I already loaded the probe in there, but it has the same quick release as the Carvera Air, where you can just kind of pull this down and put your tool in there. What I'm going to do is just press this front button, and you'll see that it's going to go in the back and set the tool height off this tool setter. So it's going to go down there. It'll set the offset, so this is how it's going to actually zero everything out. And then you're gonna see that laser's firing. It's gonna very slowly and kind of loudly, I don't know if you can hear me right now, the lid is also open so you can see, but it's gonna outline where it's gonna cut now. So you can see this is the exit points or the farthest points that's going to be cutting on this material, showing you that, hey, it's going to be safe. You know, your tool's not going to collide with maybe these clamps here. You'll see we'll go to the far right here. And we're kind of close to that, but I can tell that we're actually okay because of where that laser is. And then what it's going to do here is it's going to go to the middle and actually probe that to set the 0 point. That's the 0 point. It's going to go over here. And then it's going to prompt us for our tool with some beeps, some visual cues here. And what it's going to do actually over here is ask us for our tool number 9, which I know, if it wants to focus, tool number 9, I know that is this one right here. It is this Wexwe triple flute there. So I'm going to just put this in the machine and then we'll start it. So I'm going to press that button. It's going to start moving, and I do have the cover down right now. I'm going to actually take this off for B-roll because unlike the Carvera Air, this cover's a little bit harder to film through. It's a little bit like you can kind of see up here, it's a little blurry. If I go over here to the Air, actually, while that sets up, you can see this one's much clearer inside. But it's going to start moving over, and we can start seeing this do some chips now in just a moment. So it's going to spin up. And hopefully you'll be able to hear me over this because it is a little louder. It could also be this table, but if we just take a look here. There we go. It's starting to do some cuts. The problem I'm having right now is if I step up here, as you can kind of see all those chips collecting there, if you see that. And that's because I can't figure out how to turn on the fan. I do have this vacuum system here, but that also doesn't seem to do anything, so I'll have to figure that out, but we're just gonna keep an eye on this for now. Alright, so I was curious why the spindle fan wasn't turning on, and I came into here, this is still running the job. If we go to the top right, there's a device status diagnose here, and then we have the spindle fan, which we can toggle on or off, and I'm just going to crank that up, and you can see now that it's actually blowing the chips away. So this one just finished up the 1.5 millimeter bit in there, so you can see these are all nice and kind of squared off so switches will fit in. But what I wanted to do really quick before we move on to the next process is kind of do a little rapid fire thing of what I like and don't like about this one versus the Carvera Air over here. So let's go over to the Air really quick because I want to just show this, is that the lid on the Air, although it is clearer, you could see in a lot better here. The mechanism for opening it is just, I have hated this mechanism since I got it. It kind of always falls on my head. You have to like slide it back. I mean, it works. You have a lot of clearance in there and you can still access stuff up top, but it's just not the greatest. If we come over here to the Z1 though, this lid is just very nice. If we just put it down, it just goes down. And if we lift it, it kind of just goes up. And I don't know if that click is just the spring system or if that's intentional, but it does have like a little, which is kind of cool. The other thing I don't like on the Z1 is that the vacuum system here doesn't really pick up the chips. There's like a port in the back. If I come around here, and you can see my mess here, there's a port right there that you plug the vacuum into. But since it's in the way back there, it doesn't really pick them up. So I'm just more often than not just manually vacuuming, which is what I do on them anyway. But that's kind of annoying because if we come over here on the Air, we actually have a tube here, and then also come over here and grab it, we have a dust shoe. They'll just kind of sit on there and we'll guide the chips and vacuum out, which is very, very nice. This is that air assist I was talking about. So this is a compressor that will blow the chips away. That is okay on there, but you do need a compressor to kind of run that. Whereas on this one, we actually do have, I don't know if it's this fan or one inside, but it does have a fan that blows the chips away like that, which is very, very nice on this. I really like that a lot. And then it also does have a camera there that is not currently functional because, yet again, pre-production unit, but that'll be very cool to have where you can kind of remotely monitor it. I'm just gonna grab my vacuum really quick and clean up the remaining chips. Now that that is all done, I'm gonna just try to remove this from here. We can pop the outer frame off. We can kind of just get our plate off of here. And then there we have our completed little plate right there. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna put it off to the side, and then I'm gonna actually get another piece of metal fixed to this, and then we'll take a look on the computer at the next setup, which is basically just cutting out this part just without all the holes inside. So it's a much quicker setup. So now the next step is just to do the bottom of the keyboard, which is actually a lot simpler than the other one. You can see it's only going to take about 8 minutes versus 39 for the original here. And what we're going to do is just right click this and go to simulate. And you're going to see we're going to start by just doing our screw holes. This is actually flipped upside down so I can show you this way. We'll do our screw holes, and then we're going to actually countersink them by doing a different move that's not in the model. So we're basically just doing the contour here to kind of get a little bit of space for this screw to kind of sink into the plate, just so it's a little more flush on the bottom. So we will run that on all of these here. And then finally, we will just run a contouring pass to actually cut it out. I already have the material fixed on the machine, so I'm just gonna hop over there. I'm gonna run a time lapse on this one just so you can see what it takes. And then after that, I can show you the parts, and we're gonna do a little bit of finishing on them because the parts do come off a little rough on the machine. That's just how it works when you're cutting metal. But then what we'll do is just kind of polish them up and make them look really nice. So I'm gonna go through and time lapse the bottom cutout now. All right, so this is all complete. I'm just gonna take it off. So there it is, our finished bottom plate. We're gonna go over to the workbench now and actually take a look at these. So it's about an hour and a half or so later from milling those. This is the kind of one thing with this machine is it's only 150 watt spindle, so it's not super strong for stuff like aluminum, but it does a very nice job. So if we actually look here, you can see that this is the plate. It looks really, really clean right now. As you can see, all the little holes and stuff in there, and it looks like I actually missed one in my setup to not cut that out. So you can actually see the comparison there, that's what it looks like with the bigger tool, and that's what the smaller one does to kind of make those corners better. This should be fine probably with the stabilizers, not that we're gonna actually do that, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the plate looks pretty good. We're gonna do some finishing on that in a second, and then this is the bottom of the actual kind of sandwich here. You can see those little recessions there for the screws. They came out really, really nice. I mean, they look really good. We're gonna do some finishing on these, but I do also wanna kind of show you another project I did before this on the machine, which is this right here, which is a TS 101/100 soldering iron tip stand. We have some little 3D print spacers in there, and then we have the aluminum plate here for the holes. And also, if we look on the bottom and not drop the tips everywhere, I have these feet on it, but underneath there is actually an M3 tap, because you can actually tap screw holes, and I tried that with this. So these are M3s going directly into the metal there, which is really nice. It worked really great on that. But what I want to do now is kind of talk about finishing these parts. And what I have is just some 400 grit sandpaper here, and I'm going to just kind of brush them off. And this does two things. It makes them look a little nicer. I mean, this finish does look pretty good on here by default already because the aluminum didn't have many scratches, but this kind of like cleans them up. And then it also cleans up the edges, because the edges on these can be very, very sharp off the machine, and you can kind of see it right there. So I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to actually do the little brushed aluminum pass now. There they are, all brushed up, and I think they look kind of nice. I could have done a little bit better with this if I took a little bit more time, but there's the plate. Looks pretty good right there. And if I actually just reach over here and grab a switch, I'll just grab one of these. I think these are kale yellows, kind of clicky. You can see we can just take that switch and it will kind of pop right into the plate as you would expect. Now I'm going to do a very long just time lapse for doing it. I'm not actually going to make this board functional because I don't really feel like making it functional today and doing all the steps, because I don't have these stabilizers. Actually, I don't have screw-in stabilizers for this, so I figured if I'm going to solder everything to it, I might as well not waste a bunch of components, and instead I could just kind of show you how it works. But what we're going to do is just pop the switches in. We're going to use, wherever I put it, I have a PCB that I actually messed up for this that I'll put in here, and we'll get an idea how this will look. So I'm going to go through now, do a long time lapse kind of assembling this, and then I can show you it at the end. So we have the switches soldered on there, and they obviously don't do anything because it's kind of like a dummy board. But I wanted to point out one thing that I took into design consideration when making this sandwich case is if we actually look at the PCB there, we can see the PCB doesn't come right to the edge. It kind of has some overhang. I just thought that would look a little nicer and also prevent it if the PCB did have some sharp edges, that you wouldn't get like splinters as easily, because this is like fiberglass and this is metal. It's possible this could still cut you because it is kind of sharp. I would probably make those a little bit chamfered or something on a different revision of this, but for now, that's kind of how it is. But what I'm going to do now is put this down, and then I'm going to actually put all the like standoffs in it, finish up the assembly, and then we can kind of have some closing words on the machine. So there is the fully assembled board here, and well, mostly assembled because this obviously isn't functional. I'm in a time crunch yet again on this video, but I think it looks really cool. It looks kind of neat. It's a stacked plate design there. We have the bottom here with the brushed kind of texture, and the countersinking I did actually worked perfectly for these screws. I mean, they are right below the plate there, so it worked out really good. I really like how I did that. And we're basically going to have our closing kind of conversation on this, and I think this is the section that if you were just watching the video for the project I was building here, I mean, you could probably tune out at this point. But if you want to buy this machine or you're considering backing the Kickstarter, my thoughts on it basically are is that it is very good. It is basically, I don't want to say the bamboo of CNC, but it kind of is because it just kind of works. That's been my experience of it. And also take this into mind that I did get this machine for free, so keep that in mind that maybe I am skewed a little bit, but I haven't had any issues with it, right? Like, I didn't have any major issues other than things you would expect. Like, it is beta firmware right now because it isn't actually released. I do have it before people, so all that stuff is going to have to kind of get fixed where they'll merge it in and it will just work normally. You won't have to have two firmwares installed because basically the Air over there is not compatible with the controller. That controller is the Z1 over there, so that's why I had to have like two computers right now, is that they're not compatible with each other because it is a pre-production machine. So other than that, though, issues that relating to the pre-production stuff, I didn't have any. I mean, really, the only thing that I did really was the user error issue where I had the motor stall out once, which is kind of something to keep in mind. It is a 150 watt spindle, whereas the Air and the Carvera are 200 watt spindles. But what it did is it actually protected itself from breaking, is that it stopped the motor, it threw an error, and it said, oh, the motor is stalled. It's going to protect itself from damaging anything else. So it did stop, and then I was able to reboot the machine. It pulled the drill out, and it worked just fine. I didn't even break a bit on that, luckily, which was very nice. So it has a lot of features in there that kind of protect you, and it's all coming in the price of $900 right now for the Kickstarter, and I think the MSRP is $1,200 if I remember correctly, which is pretty affordable for a CNC that's capable to do this. Now, the biggest thing, though, I do think people need to keep in mind of this is that this is technically their entry-level CNC, right? And I don't mean that in terms of features, but I mean the way they're getting it to that price point is by size. This here fits on it perfectly. You know, split keyboards, I'm going to talk in terms of my channel where we do keyboards on here. Split keyboards, stuff like that will fit pretty nicely on. You're not going to really have issues. You probably get something about that like that. I think it's 200 by 200 millimeters is the bed size, if I remember correctly. But if you wanted to do, say, a full keyboard, if I pull up my keyboard here, this won't fit on the bed on it, which is the biggest limitation of it and kind of the thing you'll have to consider. If you want to make things that are bigger, you're going to want to step up to a machine like the Carvera Air or the full-size Carvera, which those are a lot more expensive, obviously. They do have the bigger bed there, and I think that's kind of how they're differentiating their product points, is that they have the full-size Carvera, which has the tool changer. It's a little bit bigger than the Air. The Air is kind of the sweet spot that I think is where it should sit, is it's a 250 or 300 by 300 bed, or 300 by 200, something like that. It's kind of rectangular. I don't know off the top of my head, but it is bigger and is big enough to fit something like this on there where I can mill that out. And it does have a little bit of a more powerful spindle on it. Not that that was really an issue on the Z1 back here, but the Z1, the biggest limitation of it is that bed size. And especially when you start clamping stuff down with clamps, you're going to start losing that pretty fast. So that's kind of something you have to consider here, is that when you're using a CNC, you have the clamps in there. So they're going to kind of take space up on there. But other than that, like, that's the really only kind of thing to consider with this machine, is that it's coming in at a very good price. It does very good quality. I mean, if we look at this, it did very good on the metal. It handled it just fine. I mean, I went like, it was probably like an hour and a half to do this fully, including setup time and everything. So very easy to do. And it just kind of works. Like, that's the thing with the Carveras, or the, I almost get that confused. Not Carvera. Makera is the brand name. So the Makera devices, they just kind of work. They're very easy to kind of get up and running with. They have good software on their end. The controller is actually excellent. The controller program that you use to control the machine, it will actually send the file to the machine and not even require being connected. So it does it over Wi-Fi. But once it's sent to the machine's kind of standalone. You don't need the controller open anymore, whereas in other machines, I think you do need the controller open. So that's something I really liked, especially when like my computer has died mid-process before and it just keeps running. So that's really useful. They also have Makera Cam, which is their cam program, which is really good for like PCB stuff, which I didn't talk about much in here. I do talk about that in my other full Carvera Air video, which I do recommend going to watch if you are considering the Z1, because it is basically a baby Carvera Air or a baby Carvera. You know, it's in the same ecosystem. A lot of the features kind of carry over, with some things actually being better on the Z1, like the spindle fan. That is very, very nice that it has that. Whereas on the Air, you need like a compressor and stuff to run that, which is a little bit of a pain to do. So just having the spindle fan on the Z1 is really great, that it just kind of blows the chips away. But other than that, this video might feel a little bit rushed, because it kind of is. I do have to get this out by December 12th. I have only a few days to edit this before I get in some other stuff that I have to actually make videos on too. So I'm kind of in like a time crunch at the end of the year here. But I'm hoping that for the people that just watch my channel, I'm going to be making obviously more stuff on CNCs. I want to start doing a lot more stuff with metal plates at the very least. I do like this kind of sandwich design too, which is kind of nice, but we'll be doing more stuff like that with keyboards. But for the people that are considering backing this Kickstarter or purchasing one after the fact, I do recommend the machine. I do think it is very good, as long as you're aware it is a small build volume. That's the only real issue on it. And kind of maybe the dust collection system could be a little better with the vacuum. It could have had a hose to kind of pump that out, but that's kind of nitpicking at this point. You can just open and run a vacuum on it. It's not really a big deal there. But if you are considering backing this machine or buying it, I do think it's a good machine. It does kind of just work. And with that, I don't have much else to say here. So thank you for watching. Comment, rate, and subscribe as usual, and I will see you next time.